Welcome back to the AstroInsights Podcast. In today's episode, we're looking ahead to the autumn eclipses of 2025, which are due to take place on the 7th and 21st of September. With me to discuss their significance in terms of global events and the world of finance is Christeen Skinner, one of the UK's most well-known financial astrologers and the author of several books and the host of her own YouTube channel, The Financial Universe with Christeen Skinner. Christeen has been providing insight and strategic guidance to entrepreneurs, CEOs, and leaders from a range of industries for over 4 decades. She also serves on the boards of both Urania Trust and Alexandra iBase, 2 not-for-profit organizations committed to the safeguarding of ancient wisdom and astrological texts. So, Christeen, welcome.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you here.
Well, this is quite exciting. This is a departure from the usual day. It's lovely.
Oh, well, good. Happy to provide some Sun-Uranus energy.
Yeah.
So I thought perhaps, Christeen, we could start with a brief introduction as to how you got into financial astrology, because it's quite an unusual choice for a woman, and then sort of go from there.
Okay, well, the background is this. I became a stepmother, and my stepson was about 13. At that time, I was actually practicing a bit of astrology. I met the mothers of his friends, and they were all of an age where they were thinking of, doing their own little cottage industries. What was the good time for starting up
Okay.
And I was asked, could I come up with a good date for starting? And I realized that I really did not know anything about this.
Okay.
So I hot-footed to the London Business Library. And not knowing anything about anything, I started to look for what I thought were the charts of the FTSE 100 companies, to see if I could get start dates from them, not realizing at the time what a difference there was between an IPO, when they launched their shares, and when they'd first started trading.
Okay.
Anyway, as it happened, I was fairly successful, or I just put lucky picks. I don't know quite how that worked. But anyway, I then met through these ladies, their husbands who were working in the city of London, who eventually got me to look at various other things. And so I gradually gained up a London sort of clientele, and then discovered that what appealed to me greatly was the fact that I could use harmonics, which were my big passion with astrology. I could do harmonic understanding, which I couldn't really apply in the same sort of natal astrology sense. So I gradually got into it then. I like the maths. I suppose it's as simple as that. I like the maths.
Okay, so could you explain to listeners what harmonic astrology is? Because some of them are not astrologers.
Well, most people will be familiar with the idea of you have a conjunction, 2 planets come close together, right? And they appear to be in a line. That's the conjunction. Or if they're opposite one another, you have an opposition. Or right angles, you've got a first quarter or a last quarter square.
Yes.
But harmonics allows you to look at because with those, you're actually saying either something is together, right? Or it's opposite, or right angles.
Yes, and they're all kind of challenging aspects, except for the conjunction.
But they're all very definite aspects. But those aspects are very simple. Even sixes are quite simple. But I became attracted to the idea of what happens when planets are a fifth of a circle apart, or a 7th, or 11th, or 13th, the unusual ones.
Yes.
And then I discovered there was a richness there, that there was never a condition where 2 planets weren't in some way talking to one another. And the challenge for us is trying to find out what that conversation is. And the conversation depended on how far apart these 2 things were from one another in terms of their entire cycle from a conjunction to the next conjunction.
Right.
And then I found that the people the traders, because it would come probably as a surprise to many that some of the older traders, particularly the ones that were born in the early 1930s, and remember, I was starting in the 1980s, right?
Okay.
These people were absolutely into harmonics. And, there was one gentleman, I had a fabulous conversation And he showed me his very worn ephemeris that he carried about with him, where
Gosh.
he had marked not just the aspects that we normally get with the little Raphael's book, those,
Yes.
but he'd marked in other ones, like 17th. Jupiter is a 17th away from Saturn. And he
Gosh.
marked what that had done within the markets. And he was building up a picture. In fact, I learned more astrology from that guy than I really did from anybody else. And
Fascinating.
yeah, yeah.
And what about Gann cycles? Because I mean, that sort of also kind of gets into the sort of thing in Fibonacci and the harmonics.
Absolutely, it does. And I think if Gann and those people were living today, they would be delighting in the fact that we have access through the wonderful software we've got now. I mean, remember everything they did, they were doing by hand.
Absolutely.
So it's really impressive what they were doing. But now, you can test theories in a way that you couldn't do before.
Yes, and have all the data at your disposal too to be able to sort of run these long histories.
It's absolutely it's magical because, with the Dow Jones Index, you've got more than 125 years worth of data. So you really can check something.
Yes, and look for patterns.
You can see that the fallacies, I mean, the one I use as an example every time is that there's this assumption, or has been this assumption, that the Sun and Leo go together with gold.
Right.
Well, it's painfully, it's not true. When you do the research on it, if you really want to find the best time of year for gold prices, it will be when the sun's moving through Capricorn, right, or Aquarius. It's that part of the year. It's not in the summer. The summer's not bad, but it's certainly beaten by what happens later in the year. So,
Fascinating.
I mean, it really, really is, Lisa, because there are so many things that we've been conditioned to accept. A Sun Jupiter is a good thing, but actually when you put it to the test, it's only some Sun Jupiters. It's not all of them. And different markets react, as we were just discussing before we came online, different markets react to different aspects. So Hong Kong, for example, the Hang Seng Index really can't stand anything in the mutable signs, right?
Really?
It really just doesn't like it. And it's quite funny. Right? You can go back through its data, which I think goes back to the 1950s. So you've got a fair chunk of data. And you see that, for example, it really doesn't like Saturn going through a mutable sign.
Interesting. I mean, I've noticed that even with the with Wall Street, that sort of Pisces and some of the other mutable signs seem to be times when the market really kind of tanks. It's interesting. Yeah.
It's fascinating. And just going back to the gold thing for a minute. With gold, during the course of any month, obviously the moon is passing through all 12 signs. The outstanding winner, if you really wanted to sell your gold, you would choose when the moon is going through Pisces, because that's when you're likely to get the best price in any month. Which is really interesting. And that's true of silver as well. But I think there's a whole conversation to be had actually about mutable signs, because if you look on the daily charts, this is where you can see how much a price has moved during the course of a day.
Yes.
Prices tend to move. The range of prices is far greater on a mutable sign day than it is on, say, a cardinal sign.
There's more fluidity in the market.
That's right. Or you could say that, some traders are headless chickens and don't know which way to go.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you say that, because I was going to ask you about the role of the luminaries in determining sort of trends. And of course, that is the go-to, is that, the moon rules silver and the sun rules gold. But clearly you've been in this game a long time, and you've sort of refined the subtleties and are perhaps ahead of the curve as far as all that's concerned, compared to sort of newbies like me.
I think it's possible that it was true that the sun and Leo and gold went together, say, during the 19th century or 17th, going back.
Sure, yes.
I think it does depend hugely on the background. And this is the danger thing with looking, say, if you're just going to look at eclipses or the lunar cycle, is that the background is key. And the
Yes.
background really is set by the much slower moving planets. And I think
Yes.
it's absolutely true. Like, for example, when I'm doing my normal work, I
Mhm.
prefer now, and this is an odd thing to be saying now, but I prefer my research actually to go in depth into the last 4 to 5 years since Pluto went into Aquarius. I don't want to necessarily compare that with the backdrop of Pluto in Capricorn, because that was different.
Yes, that's a whole
Right?
different era. Yes.
It's a whole era, right?
Mm.
So you can't possibly just talk about any one of those bits because it's the entire picture, right? You can't break them
Yes.
apart. You've got to look
Yes.
at this. So when one of the luminaries, or if you like, the eclipses that are coming up, when
Mhm.
they start to aspect that little triangle, which has been, it depends how much orb you want to allow, but I would say that triangle firmed up, roughly speaking, around the solar eclipse in October of 2023. And it doesn't
Interesting.
come apart until the beginning of 2028. So it's a very long
Mm.
period, and that's the frame. Everything else is happening within that frame. So that period of time has to be considered very differently to earlier periods.
Yes, interesting that you say that. I mean, I only really started to pick up on it at the eclipses last year, when it felt like there was a sort of a sea change happening. And soon after that, you started to get, for example, the UK making changes to fiscal policy. And of course, this year with the Jupiter-Saturn squares, we've had Trump
Yeah.
with his tariffs that have started to sort of cause waves in the market, shall we say. Yes, so it's interesting that you say that. So Pluto in Aquarius for you, um, how do how do you sort of see that in general as far as the market is concerned? I mean, presumably, um, you see the sort of the emphasis on technology with things like AI, space travel, and crypto and that sort of thing, which have come to the fore since I suppose 2020, really. From the sort of the 30s, that's when it kind of came into my awareness. And obviously, Bitcoin's been around since 2009. But I'd just be interested to get your take on that, because you are talking about this different era, and Pluto does seem to be very prominent at the moment, as far as.
It absolutely is. So I'm looking at that. I'm also looking at investments that are to do with space, right? Which I now see as being the next Silk Road. Um,
Okay.
which is, and that's a very interesting piece of, because we're also fixated on what's going on the world in the world with these wars that are all over the place, right? When in fact, actually, I think we should be looking up at the skies and worrying a bit more about who's doing what up there. Um, yeah, I think what I'm noticing and remembering, I mean, my perspective may be wrong, because I'm just working here. But
Sure.
when I'm talking to my traders, a lot of whom just appear to be working for themselves, right?
Hmm.
Except they're not. When you go in a little deeper, you discover that they're on all sorts of forums. And in fact, they're working really as a collective, although they may not have a group name.
Interesting.
And I think that's another element of the Pluto in Aquarius, which of course is another part of the reason why Bitcoin and these things ever came into being, is because there's this resentment against the banking industry,
Yes.
and a desire to, can we come together and can we do something more collective where it's all equal? So
Yes.
we're only at the beginning of this journey now. This is just started. And it's, it does have its weaknesses, as we know. The Saturn-Neptune is also bringing in the ideas of the construction that's not safe,
Right.
the fact that it's still a wild west, because it is.
Yes.
You've got the Securities and Exchange Committee Commission in the States, which you don't actually know which way they're going to rule on anything, right?
Yes.
And they
In
don't
terms
even
of
seem to know that.
regulation.
Yeah, right. With the regulations, if you compare that to the 1940s, whilst Uranus was going through Taurus, late 30s and 40s, the Securities and Exchange were already on at certain companies and saying, no, you can't behave like this. By the time Uranus went into Gemini, they decided what the rules were going to be. And that's where we are now. We're right at the beginning
Yes.
of finding what this what the structure is going to be and how safe it's going to be, because at the moment it's not.
Yes, yes. Into you talk about in terms of crypto regulation.
Well, I'm talking really right across the board, Lisa,
Okay.
because
Ah.
I think that little triangle that we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
now is it's an unsafe triangle. It's, but with both Saturn and Neptune slipping either side of the world axis, so, of 0 degrees Aries, Saturn's not entirely sure. Is it going to be in Pisces? Is it going to be in Aries? Where are we at? We won't
Uh-huh.
really know where we're at until they both of them gone in heliocentrically.
And also there's the retrograde periods and that sort of thing. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but I guess from their conjunction next year, we should be sort of in clearer territory as far as that's concerned.
I really want to, I really, really hope so, Lisa, but I suspect that we're going to have to wait a bit longer
Okay.
because, I mean, there are quite a few reasons for this.
Mm-hmm.
If I could go back to the solar eclipse this year,
Yes.
the one that was about 8-9 degrees of Aries at the
So,
end of March.
so we're talking about the solar eclipse that happened in
March,
Aries.
March
Just
the 31st.
Yes, just before before Neptune ingressed into Aries.
Yeah. Now,
Yes.
I think, with an eclipse, I do think it's like a big gong note in the sky, and it reverberates.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it reverberates actually for quite a long time. And I think with the case of that one, because it was so important for so many
Yes.
reasons, it
Yes.
might reverberate all the way through until both Saturn and Neptune have gone past 8-9 degrees of Aries, which is a very long time.
So what sort of time frame are we talking? I don't.
Well, with Saturn, we should be out of it by 2027. But
Okay.
with Neptune, we're going to be talking about nearer to 2030.
Gosh, yes. So quite a long time. So yes. So possibly like a whole Saros cycle of
Almost.
Mhm.
It's the reverberation is really, really long.
Interesting. And it did feel like that. It had that feeling of being a sort of a very, if you want to use sort of astrology parlance, like a cardinal. It felt strongly cardinal,
Oh, it,
that eclipse.
it,
Yes.
it was huge. And really, because both Venus and Mercury both did Mercury retrograde stunts on the same degree, or within 1 degree of that. So
Yes.
Venus turned retrograde first, I think, at 8 of Aries, at which point markets started to fall, particularly in the West.
Mm-hmm.
The eclipse accelerated things, right?
Yes.
And we should also talk about the inauguration chart and how that fitted in with it all.
Yes. Yes. Well, I mean, I guess we could put that in context and say that certainly from the eclipses the previous year, so the autumn, we had a very strong, and as we move towards the election of Trump, we had the Jupiter-Saturn squares. So we had. I can't remember the dates now. But as soon as that sort of happened, you then had these eclipses, and you kind of seemed to move into this energy that was where markets suddenly went. First of all, we had Trump being elected, then markets kind of went crazy in the
November.
US.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then from there, we kind of got to February, and then this set of eclipses here, and then all of a sudden you got this lunar eclipse that was really fuzzy, in sort of Virgo Pisces,
Yes.
and things seem to get very unclear all of a sudden. And then we kind of then we had this one, the 29th of March solar eclipse in Aries. So, and I suppose just before that was the inauguration. So, yes, maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think it was a really interesting day. I think anybody should look back on their own life and think of, what was happening on the 20th of January, because the lineup that day was extraordinary. There's no question about that. There was a Grand Cross, which is unusual. I did, because obviously I'm looking at this stuff coming. So I was looking at the inauguration chart. And whoever got the job, whether it was Kamala Harris or whoever got that job, that Grand Cross was going to be there. And that signaled trouble. I went back to look at all the inauguration charts from the 1930s to see if anybody had gone through anything similar before, and that hadn't happened. So it was a really stressful chart right from the beginning. Mercury
Yes.
was at 18 degrees of Aries, I think, Capricorn, right? On one of the, what I, know to be one of the critical financial degrees. So you
Right.
could see that being the storm. You knew that that was going to be the setting, that chart's going to reverberate, sorry, but
Yes.
like the eclipses, it's going to reverberate a long time. It's still active in January of next year and January of 2027.
Gosh.
So this tariff thing is an ongoing situation. And the
Yes.
coming eclipses, I think, will only exacerbate it, right? Which is why I think markets will react badly, if you want to see it like that. I think we'll not probably have a correction of some kind in September between the two eclipses.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you said it because yes, the moment it's almost like the markets they had their jitter in April, sort of March, April, and then it was like, oh, well, Trump then reversed his policies, and then the markets kind of thought, well, we don't really need to take him seriously, so they didn't really react. And now we're coming up to August, and he seems to have sort of dug his heels in. We passed the Saturn, the Jupiter Saturn square. So that was what, 19th of June, I think. And he still seems to be in that position. So yes, I think you're right. When people come back from holiday and the markets sort of pick up in September, that's normally a Gann turning point, isn't it? It's
well,
sort of a pivot point.
It is. I think, Lisa, I actually thought something might have happened at this recent full moon, which was across 19 degrees or 18 something or other of Cancer Capricorn. And that I know to be a sort of danger financial signal, that axis.
Interesting.
So I was surprised that nothing happened, and it didn't happen anywhere across the world. And all of the markets sort of ignored that. Now,
interesting, although Bitcoin suddenly went up.
Well, yes, but that was a slightly different reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But it happened at the full moon. So yeah. Anyway, back to your story. Yes.
But sticking with the regular markets, I did expect them to react. I still expect them to react, and probably before the Gann date, which in the Gann date would be about the 21st of September.
Yes. Yes. So
but I think if you look at this with the Saros cycle and things, you're going to go back to 2007.
That's right.
If you look at silver or gold or anything for that time, you'll find that they all reacted at the lunar eclipse, which is more or less the same date, September the 7th. So I think for me, it could be that, and this worries me a lot, because I hope they don't wait until September the 7th to have their big turning point. And I do wonder what might happen at the next full moon, which is August the 9th.
Okay.
Or is it August the 9th or 10th? Because you have this, well, for a start, we've got a Star of David forming from early August. You've got the two grand trines, one in fire and one in air. And you have that amazing kite formation, which is there at the August 9th full moon, where you've got the triangle that I was talking about, but with Mars now opposing the Saturn-Neptune.
Oh, interesting. And Mars, of course, was also a signature in the Trump inauguration chart.
Absolutely. And that the Mars, 2 days before the eclipse, before the actual kite formation, when it's on the world axis, is on the degree of the forthcoming solar eclipse.
Ah, interesting.
And sometimes an eclipse can be triggered by one of the fast-moving planets.
Yes.
So it wouldn't be so surprising if that happened. To me, this is reminiscent of, I think it was August of oh my goodness, was it 1997 or 1998, when we had the Russian ruble crisis? I can't remember now, but it's reminiscent of that time, because there's that whole thing of, because I can remember doing the work at that time and saying to the guys I was working with, I don't think the bankers should be on holiday. And somebody said, oh, don't be silly, Christine. Everybody goes away in August.
Yes,
away
for August.
Yeah, nothing will happen until September. And yet it all fell apart in the August. And so I do wonder if we're not going to see something similar.
Well, I suppose possibly given the sort of Russia-Ukraine situation, the fact that Trump seems to be changing his mind with regards to his approach to Putin, and also there seem to be movements to introduce sanctions both from Europe and from possibly from the US as well. So yeah, I mean that could potentially trigger something, definitely.
Mm.
Yes, but did you going back to the inauguration chart? Was there anything else there that you wanted to sort of highlight? Because this is really the start of Trump's presidency, and he is the one who, at the moment, is having the greatest effect on world markets. Plus, he's got a lot of mutable stuff in his chart, and that of course keys into these eclipses.
Well, yes, and I think if you considering his chart, and obviously the thing we focus on are the eclipses, but actually it's the nodes moving around that's the big
Yes.
factor, right?
Yes, because that's where
And-
the eclipses happen.
Yeah,
Yes, it's
and-
where the
and he's-
paths of the sun and the moon cross.
Yeah, and he's had both Saturn and the lunar nodes affecting his Gemini Sagittarius axis. And yes, I think things are really coming undone for him. The chickens are, if you like, they are coming home to roost. The Saturn is on his tail.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you've seen this from the point of view of karma. Yeah, and it's also interesting too that this opposition that you're talking about in his chart is between the luminaries, and of course he's got a Sun-Uranus conjunction as well in Gemini. That's sitting on either side of the node, the north node.
Mm.
Yes, so that's super interesting,
Mm.
right? So you're kind of seeing this as karma, sort of a karmic type of
Well, yes,
transit.
and I think, Lisa, that this, we're having our conversation. It's now, I think we're pre-recording, but it's the 21st of July, and there's going to be a new moon this week, which opposes Pluto, and then that solar eclipse that's coming, the eclipse itself will be opposite both Saturn and Neptune. Well, if you went back to really old-fashioned ways of working, you would wonder whether or not we would see the loss of a world leader.
Yes, in terms of like the sun and that kind of thing. Yes.
Now, it doesn't have to affect America. It could be anywhere. It could be here. It could be anywhere. But it seems to me that there's a tectonic shift going on now.
Yes.
And-
Definitely, I agree with you. And I guess this is what you were talking about with the underlying aspect between the outer planets.
Yes. And you see, we are, everybody says we're talking about a new age. We really are. I think now we're seeing an edginess where people are losing their jobs to AI.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. Yes. And in terms of symbolism for you with the astrology, are you identifying AI with a particular sign or planet, or not really?
No, not really. I mean, obviously, we've all been thinking, oh, it's Pluto in Aquarius, or it's Uranus in Gemini, or it's a combination of the two. But actually, AI has been coming towards us now for quite some time. This was not new. we could feel it. We could feel it coming. So I'm not 100% sure about that, because I think maybe it's also been a little bit of Neptune in Pisces, if I'm honest.
Yes, I agree with you with that, and I think you could see that with social media too.
Yes,
the Neptune in Pisces.
Yeah.
That there was a little bit of a sort of a detachment from reality and distortion happening.
Yes.
Which hopefully Neptune and Aries will resolve. That's what I'm hoping, especially with the conjunction with Saturn. Come back to reality. Let's put in some guardrails. Let's put in some regulation. That kind of thing. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, isn't it? Really, that it was as Saturn joined Neptune in Pisces that we started to hear on the news that there should be a restriction on the social media thing, or children shouldn't be allowed to access this, that, or whatever. And Saturn, so it began then, but it hasn't really built up enough steam yet because it's Piscean. It's still, nobody's quite sure what the handrails should look like. They think they should be there. But do you know what? It's a bit like if you were climbing up a mountain, what they put in at the moment is just a rope to stop you falling off.
Yes.
Yes.
And we haven't had the first conjunction yet. We were having
No.
a close pass in August, but it'll only happen sort of early next year, won't it?
Yes. Yes,
Yes.
indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's still, you can feel it coming, that there was a definite shift from that eclipse that we were talking about, the 29th of March, when Neptune ingressed into Aries, and then we had Saturn ingress into Aries a few months later, and you could feel the shift starting to happen. But as you say, it's only the beginning of the sign, so at that stage it's still potential. We haven't seen sort of manifestations in external reality yet.
No, that's
Yeah.
absolutely true. And Lisa, that's you bring up something else with this, because I think astrologers certainly tuned into that Neptune ingress very quickly, because they could
Yes.
see it in their ephemeris. But
Yes.
from a heliocentric perspective, it hadn't happened. Right? And the client conversations, because they're not reading the ephemeris, they started to talk about it more a few weeks later, which was sort of interesting, that this is where astrology can give a heads up at times.
Yes, absolutely. Although, we did see, I think I think it also, sometimes people sense it, but
Yes.
they don't have the words or these symbols to
Yep.
articulate it. So the astrologers do that for them.
Mhm.
And then suddenly they say, oh yes, that's what I was sensing. But
Yes.
now you've given me the sort of the words, the vocabulary to be able to express it. Because I felt that very strongly with the March lunar eclipse. We were in this fog almost, and a lot of people were talking about it, but more in terms of the lack of clarity in politics, for example, in the US, where things seem to kind of go into this a period of undoing, I would say, is probably
Yeah.
the best way of putting it.
That's a fabulous expression for it. That you're talking about the March the 14th one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And absolutely you're right about that. Now, if we get echoes of that on September the 7th, which we might,
Yes, I think we might.
easily get that, because what we're already sensing, and we're on the other side of the pond, and we don't really know what's going on behind Mr. Trump, but I do have the sense that there is no clarity about who is actually in charge, who is doing what.
Yes, and what the rules are, because at the moment it's just this big project of dissolving, of undoing things, but not putting anything in place.
Yeah.
So, I thought it was interesting, for example, even just looking at the Saros series for these upcoming eclipses, that, for example, with the lunar eclipse, we get in terms of the human design, which basically translates the degrees into hexagrams.
Yes.
And so we've got the moon in gate 63, which is hexagram 63. So it's about doubts and the need to clarify, verify, or refine knowledge. And we've got the sun in gate 64, before completion, which is processing and making sense of chaos, navigating through confusion, allowing time to connect the dots and uncover hidden insights. So this really sort of speaks to this mutable energy that we're kind of talking about. And then on top of that, if we look at the Saros sort of series that's coming in September, the 21st, this is Brady's New South series, where she's talking about bringing to the surface and dealing with long-term worries or outstanding paperwork around things like health, loved ones, so things like wills, health insurance, tax, etc., and that these could be prompted by a worrying piece of news. Now, of course, if we think about what happened with the cuts to Medicaid and Social Security in the US with the big beautiful bill, which I think got passed quite close to the Jupiter-Saturn square, didn't it?
Yes, it did. That was the 4th of July. Yep.
Yes, we can see that the potentially, this starts to now have an impact, and people start to notice or to start to worry about the real term impacts of what this could mean for them in terms of things like health insurance, Social Security, etc.
Lisa, I could not agree with you more. That's superb. That's exactly, that sums it up.
Interesting. So yes, just sort of, those are kind of very overview type of things, but for you, in terms of the autumn, what are sort of the major astrological trends that you're seeing or that you're concerned about that might play into this picture, or in terms of markets and that kind of thing?
Well, depends who I'm working for, is the answer. We seem to be going through a real property-itis thing at the moment.
And do you think that's Jupiter in Cancer?
No, well, that's a factor in it. But no, we're certainly going through that. I have to work long term, Lisa.
Yes,
So
sure.
it's unlikely that people really ask me to look at the fourth quarter of the year because I'm supposed to have done that 2 years ago, right?
Okay.
So, so I'm always looking, something further down the line. And the nodal cycle and Jupiter's position relative to the nodal cycle gives quite a lot to say about recessions and the property market. So I've been saying for ages, we're headed towards this a recession, a global recession thing, probably like mid 27 going through 2028.
Okay, interesting.
So we've actually with the because I work with essentially with a small group of clients who are doing long-term investing. They're looking into the 2030s and whatever. And what they're aiming at the moment, I am only, you have to remember, they are not hanging on my every word, Lisa, right? They're talking to other experts as well.
Yes, of course.
Right?
Yes.
But the general agreement is to be cash rich presently, right? And to be,
Yes.
in a good cash position for 2027, right? Because there will be opportunities to buy that there weren't there before, right? Now, you can argue the other side of that and say, well, that's taking advantage of people who are going to lose things. Right.
Yes, of course. I mean, it sort of swings roundabouts. Yes.
It absolutely is. So
it's interesting that you say that because in terms of the Gann cycle, that fits exactly with the 20-year sort of Gann cycle where sort of in terms of that, we were looking at decline from 2023 in the markets, and then the advice to be cash rich and to sort of cash out of things, and then property crash 2026, 2027. So a good time to buy. Interesting.
We're only quibbling about a few months really, and and it does actually depend on exactly where in the world you are because they don't all come down at the same time. But it is like a flu, it starts in one place and goes on.
Yes.
My eyes would be on what's happening in Canada. Watch. As soon as the Canadian prices start coming down, then you'll see it across everywhere else. But
interesting. And it's that sort of cancer. Canada's a Cancer country, isn't it?
It is. It's got a Sun-Uranus conjunction at 8 degrees of Cancer, and which is really fascinating, given that everything it's been talking about in this last week or so is Jupiter's going through there, and it's flexing in a way that it hasn't done before. Right? Now Jupiter's gone past every 12 years, but we've never had it quite to this degree. It's now saying these are the assets I've got. These are what I'm going to protect, right? Which is a reflection of the progressions in its chart as well. But it's Mark Carney's he got the job. He actually took the job on that March the 14th lunar eclipse.
Oh gosh, yes, I forgot about that. Yes, so his energy is really kind of keyed into that.
Absolutely.
Yes. And you were talking earlier about the cardinal stuff in the inauguration chart. So presumably you're seeing a lot of connections through the cardinal signs.
Yes, I am. Because, many countries in the world, if you look at the Book of World Horoscopes, many countries are cardinal, right? I think there are more cardinal than there are any of the others.
Yes, certainly the UK is sort of cardinal.
Yeah, Australia,
the US,
it's most of the Commonwealth, right?
Yes,
yes. And then, of course, America.
Japan, I think, as well.
Yes, Japan too. And even China, right? But looking at all of those and realizing that you have both Saturn and Neptune going through a cardinal sign shortly, right? You can
which
see
opposes, or squares those signs.
Yes. Yeah. So you can see a shift in their administration, a shift in desire. We talk about the Saturn-Neptune cycle in relation to Russia particularly, right? And say that the Russian Revolution things they tend to change their admin or their government along with the Saturn-Neptune. So that's
interesting.
It's an amazing story, Lisa. It's just it's like clockwork. That's assuming, of course, that the pattern doesn't break. And that's
quite. And there's always the danger of that. Yes.
Yeah, that's the thing. We think we've cracked the code, and then the cosmos sends the custard pie.
Yeah, so we can see why this configuration of the outer planets is so important because a lot of these planets are either in air signs or in fire signs.
Yes. Yes. And I think this, to me, Lisa, this is the real difference. But this is why it's very tempting always to go back in history and say, well, what happened last time? Right?
Yes.
But
yes.
we're never comparing like with absolute like. Right?
No.
And so we've got to bring an element of artistry, really, to interpretation.
Yes.
And that's just a never-ending quest. And, I fire myself regularly on every Monday morning and then have to be reinstated later in the day. Yeah, because this stuff requires it requires a very calm mind.
Yes, it does, as does trading. So
Yeah, and then going back to your Gann thing, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I've lost count of the number of people that come in and say, well, I've been studying Gann, right? And I think, well, you haven't studied it very hard then, because if you had, you'd realize that your chart is so very different to his, and you are so emotional compared to him. He worked with numbers, right? That was his thing. Also, it is absolutely not true that every trade he made was successful, right? He learned the hard way. He did some incredibly bad trades under Saturn transits and learned the hard way.
Yes, as perhaps Trump is going to find now, as you're saying about that Saturn transit. So yeah, that's interesting.
It's almost surprising, Lisa, that he hasn't come unstuck before now. And
no, I mean he's like the cat with 9 lives, isn't he? I mean,
it's the Teflon factor, and you look at it and you think, well, is this the Regulus thing? What is saving him every time? And then you have to wonder, well, why aren't the gods beaming him up? Why are we going through this? Because it seems so nonsensical. But perhaps it's necessary. I'm reading this book at the moment about 1167 BC.
Gosh, what happened then?
Well, apparently it was the year that everything changed. Civilization changed, and it's a really fascinating thing about the closing off of one civilization, the birth of others. But you realize that all of this has happened before. And,
yes.
We've had the collapse of the Roman Empire. We're seeing the collapse of the American one.
Yes, and I mean that's really started to become obvious with the USA's Pluto Return.
Yes, Pluto is doing its job.
Yes, and it's in the second house. So this is the economy and the wealth disparities that we're seeing. So absolutely, and of course, Pluto takes a long time to sort of play out. So I mean, I almost feel as if Donald Trump is almost the what do you want to say? It's sort of the what is that? Who's those Greek gods that are sort of the nemesis?
Yes, he is, but he's an essential character at this
yes, he's a catalyst
in their development. He's essential.
That's right. Yes, and I feel that, and with his Sun Uranus conjunction in Gemini, that that's why he's so unpredictable, and then of course the opposition to the moon. His moon in Sagittarius, which also makes him very changeable and sort of make emotional decisions on a whim. So he's very hard to predict. He's difficult to control, and I suppose in that sense, it's part of the reason why the tariff situation is so difficult for traders and for people to plan.
Absolutely it is. And that's why you've got to have some admiration really for the other leaders in the world, who are trying to find a way around a problem that is just, it's a child having a tantrum. And
Yes, absolutely. And looking for attention all the time by sort of constantly moving the goalposts.
Yeah.
Yes. But I mean he's got Pluto in Leo, which I think is quite interesting. That's quite formidable. So there's this very changeable sort of whimsical side to him, but then there's also this very powerful sort of bully as well. That is sort of underlying things, and I think it's interesting that it's in Leo, and of course we sort of about to enter Leo season with the sun kind of changing signs, and then so will a lot of the personal planets.
Yeah.
So And in fact, Mercury is currently retrograde in Leo, isn't it?
Yes, and this is why I wonder with this new moon that opposes Pluto. And again, what's interesting, if you go back to the inauguration chart, that started off with a Sun conjunct Pluto in Aquarius, and now we've got to the halfway point of the cycle. Right? The Sun's moved away, and we've got the opposition. Right? So this really is the testing time for the authority of that.
Yes, and of course the Sun and Pluto would have been, if you use a noon chart, would have been sort of right on the midheaven, and Mars too. I mean, Mars was coming off a hard aspect to Pluto as well, wasn't it?
That's right. I felt right at the start, Lisa, that I thought it was extremely unlikely that whoever had the presidency, and again, I'm not taking sides here, but whoever got the job was unlikely to be in the position in 18 months later. Because you'd got progressions, with the midheaven, the Sun and Pluto, all moving, whichever rate you want to choose, right? Which is why I was giving myself a window of 12 to 18 months. Whichever system you use, I don't think that presidency in that form was going to last. So then the next thing is really to start to think about, well, if he goes, what takes its place, right?
Yes, and Vance happens to be a Sun Leo.
Yeah.
And everyone's kind of talking about, is he going to succeed Trump? Are the tech bros lining him up to take over?
Yes.
Because of this whole kind of techno-feudalism, and of course that fits very well with Leo.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So thoughts on that?
I don't know. I mean, I have to say I'm really worried about this. I'm struggling with words here because I know words are really important.
Yes,
because once you've articulated something, it can start to happen. I don't want to manifest anything here, and I don't want to get power mad either. But we've got this this colossal Star of David coming. Well, that makes you think of Israel for a start.
Yes, of course. Yes,
and then that implies, what is the Israel effect? What is that about?
Yes, and we've already seen that as a sort of a shadow over the end of Biden's presidency and the beginning of Trump's with Iran and with Gaza and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm looking at that because I know, for Israel itself, you tend to look at the Saturn-Pluto cycle because it responds to that.
Absolutely, yes.
But this Star of David, this really troubles me, that August period. There's a book that I chanced upon whilst I was staying with a publisher earlier this year, but Horoscope for the New Millennium. And it was written in the 1990s by a gentleman called Meese, Meece. And I've mentioned this because I think the work is absolutely extraordinary, breathtakingly fabulous, because he was forecasting, 35 years ahead of time and saying that he thought this August full moon would be America's Tiananmen Square moment. Now, I mean, how incredible to use that language, over 3 decades earlier to pinpoint this. I mean, how fantastic. What quality stuff is that? But it does make me wonder what is going to happen, in a few weeks' time, because already you can see America is crumbling, right? They are at odds with one another. Is California going to break away? Is California, Washington State, and Oregon, are they going to join forces and break away?
Well, I thought it was so fascinating that you mentioned this in your book, The Financial Universe. And I remember reading it in 2020, just before the election, the November election. And I remember you talking about the possibility of America breaking up. And I thought, this is crazy. But now, I mean, since the Pluto return has really started to bite, I mean, it's really not that sort of inconceivable at all.
No, it's not. My timing was out. My timing was definitely out.
Sure, but the basic principle.
The principle, I think. I think I got the principle right. I thought it would all be done and dusted, and they would be broken apart by 2028.
Interesting.
That and that might still happen.
Well, it might. I mean, for me, what I think is so fascinating about all this is you've got the Pluto return, and you've also got this link to the French Revolution.
Yes.
Which in and of itself is being played out again in America.
Yes.
It's almost like you're having, the president and the people around him are turning themselves into the French king.
Yes.
And so you kind of think, well, what does that mean for the people? Will they revolt off with his head?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
especially with all these cuts and this Doge business and, you know, sort of mercilessly firing people and that sort of thing. Of course, it's going to have a repercussion.
Yes.
And of course, you know, we saw it with people like Luigi Mangione and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
This resentment's been building for a long time because of the wealth inequalities, which again is Pluto, I think, in that second house of the economy and of sort of assets and that kind of thing. So this has been building for a long time. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, interesting that you're talking about sort of August. I mean, I didn't necessarily, in my own mind, foresee it happening quite so soon, but you certainly kind of felt like, where's this kind of going?
Well,
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, well, this brings us into again, just to reiterate, this comes back into the solar eclipse in September because Mars is
Yeah.
going to take up the position of that solar degree in August. So it could trip the eclipse into action early. That's not unheard of.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thought, especially given that the lunar eclipse it's kind of mirroring, as I said, the energy of the lunar eclipse in March, and the solar eclipse that happened in March was also part of a very violent Saros family. I mean, this was
Yeah.
9 new north,
Yes.
which concerns things like sudden change, unexpected disruption, natural disaster, violent outbreaks, and we've certainly seen that since that eclipse has happened with you know, with Israel-Gaza, with Iran.
Yeah.
You know, things really sort of ramping up in India, Pakistan.
Yeah.
A lot of kind of beating of the war drum sort of happening. So, I mean, yes, quite possibly as this cycle draws to a close, which is that's the way I tend to sort of view the eclipses, is that the solar eclipse, like a new moon, begins a 6-month cycle and until the next solar eclipse, and then we'll sort of see what the new solar eclipse brings to the party. But of course, you were talking earlier about how you saw that March eclipse as having far longer ramifications, which it can, of course, because of the Saros sort of cycle.
Yes. And I think that the position, you know, of all the planets at any eclipse, and I mean, I know you can say everything is always at work, Lisa. You know, you have to be,
Yes,
yeah,
you have to sort of focus.
you've got to draw the line somewhere. But no, I do think that some eclipses have far longer effect than others. And I don't know if you've seen Bill Meridian's book on eclipses, you know, the geopolitical
no, I
one,
haven't.
right? Where he's showing, you know, even from the rise of Islam, and he's actually showing it, how an eclipse can last hundreds of years. I think he's right in that.
Well, I mean, even if you look at Brady's work, I mean, if you look at how long her Saros families last for, I mean, they can be centuries.
Yes,
As they move from the north node to the south node and sort of vice versa.
Yeah.
Yes, so they can. I mean, obviously, it's like everything. You get sort of the mini cycle, you get the mid cycle, and you get the sort of the maxi sort of version. So yes, I mean, we could be talking a long time, especially given that Neptune changed signs, and that's such a slow moving planet.
Yep.
Yes. I mean, it's interesting. It's really, really interesting. Yes, I'm just having a look at that solar eclipse in September. It's also interesting that it happens on the 21st of September, so very close to the equinox. So it's kind of keying into those seasonal sort of cycles that you were talking about with Gann and with the markets, and also, as you said, I'm just looking at some of the aspects. So you've got Pluto at sort of 1 degree of Aquarius, making a square to Mars and to, I mean, quite loosely to Mercury in Libra, and both of those are quite close to the Sun and the Moon, which are right at the end of Virgo. So that's interesting too, in terms of is that not the Mars Pluto square? Is that not the last in the series that happened? Because it was one that happened right at the end of 2024, and you had that New Orleans event in America, and where there was quite a lot of Islamophobia sort of generated then, and then there'd been one before that, I think. But that's also violence, isn't it? It's quite strongly sort
I'm
of.
afraid I'm not. I can't do the Mars Pluto cycle for you, but I'm thinking that, you know, when you've got so many things happening at the very end of signs, right?
Absolutely.
Making
Yes,
them
that's very
all sort of-
potent.
making them anoretic, Mm.
Mhm. Yes.
That requires tremendous care to negotiate that.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Because I mean, you've got Pluto at the beginning of a degree. You've got the Sun and the Moon at the end, and both of those are sort of
Yeah.
quite strong markers, as was the case, I guess, with the March eclipse too, when Neptune's right at the end of
Mm.
Pisces.
I
Yes. So
think
it's
really the bottom line of this, Lisa, is that we have to view this as being the closing off, the ending of a chapter. Right? Um, I hope it's not the ending of the book. I hope we can have open another chapter better next year, right? But it has all that at the moment. There's that sense of potential catastrophe. Right? Um, Nobody wants to
interesting.
worry a client. Nobody wants to do that.
Sure.
But you
Sure.
also need to be prepared for something. And the
Exactly.
omens, if you like, are not
Yes.
good presently. Nobody should be trading presently unless they're really skilled traders, because the potential for them losing a lot is great. Right? The
Okay.
cosmic winds presently are not good. They're really not
Okay.
good.
Mhm.
You can see the length of the bars. The fluctuations are too great, which just all that's telling you is that everything is unstable. It's,
Right.
it's
Yes. There's a pivot coming.
yeah. So there's a pivot coming. If you look away, right, and just look away, everything comes right after a period of years.
Right.
There's a wonderful study that was done by the Bank of Scotland,
Uh-huh.
which did it. It's a very simple, one branch of it was a very simple study where they said over a 10-year period, if you'd bought at the new moon and sold at the full, how much
Yes.
would you have made? Alternatively, if you just bought at the beginning and sold at the end, was there a difference? And the
Right.
difference was massive, right? It was
Mm.
something like you would have made, I can't remember what it was, but anyway, you would have made about 3 times as much profit. It was a really good one, right?
With the lunar cycle.
With the lunar cycle. Right?
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
that worked. And I got, oh, great, lovely. This was early on in my learning. I thought, oh, great,
Mhm.
lovely. I don't have to do any work. That's all you have to do, buy it the new and sell it the full. Right? But of course, that doesn't work for every market. And you
No.
can't, and it wouldn't work on every lunar cycle in the month, because supposing the full moon happens to coincide with, I don't know, a planet changing signs or retrograde or something.
Yes. Yes.
Also, it was putting all new moons into the same basket. And there's a difference between a cardinal, a fixed, and a mutable. So you have to be
Absolutely.
selective with what you're looking at. But
Yes.
the principle, what they were showing really was that there is something here. There is something that's worth researching more. And that's and cracking the astro code for whether it be the FTSE or the DAX or whatever. Right. That's what keeps me going each day. I want to crack the code.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? It's sort of that curiosity that sort of keeps you motivated. Like what am I not seeing?
What am I not
here?
seeing?
Yeah.
There's a pattern here. Why can't I get it?
Yes. Absolutely.
I've got a Sagittarian moon, so I'm always looking at multiple charts, which is really stupid, really, because if I could just focus on just one or two, I might actually do it. But there's always the temptation to say, well, if it doesn't work on this one, let's try it over here. Because you're always sure it's going to work somewhere. But that's
Yes. Yes.
so
Absolutely.
it's always a work in progress, which is very unhelpful to people, I know, but that's where we are. That's where we are. We're just at the beginning of this. The amazing thing that we can do now with the software, and because we've got the data, is that we can test theories. And really,
Absolutely.
we couldn't do that until relatively recently.
Very, very true. Absolutely. And I think it's quite amazing how astrology does tend to adapt to new technologies and new environments and new formats. Is something very mutable about.
Well, we want to understand. We can't leave it alone, right? We're
Yes.
absolutely convinced that there is a connection, and we
There's a
just kind of
pattern.
find the phone line, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Absolutely. It's
and
true. It's true. Yes.
It's lovely doing things like this, because you realize other people are trying to, get on the same communication thing as well. You're not alone.
Absolutely. But I think also what's so nice is that everybody has their own individual approach. And I think, if you talk to people like Patrick Curry, that is right, actually, because astrology, as much as it's about the heavens and what's happening up there, astrology happens here on Earth by humans. It's a
Yes.
human endeavor. It's it's sort of an anthropological
Yep.
pursuit, and everyone's going to approach it slightly differently because of their charts, their background, their education, what they're looking at, and so I think it's always wonderful to exchange paradigms, if you like, or sort of perspectives, because everybody is coming at it slightly differently.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's fine. That's why one client will prefer one astrologer and not another one, and and why uh, one sort of a certain company chart will speak to you and why another one won't. I think sometimes it's
Yes,
also just down to
and just on that, Lisa, and this is just a recent experience. Somebody asked me to do a company chart work, and I responded, the usual way. Yes, I'd be delighted. Blah blah blah.
yes,
Please, but I need about a week to do some back testing.
okay,
And he wrote back and said, "What do you mean back testing?" And I said, "Well, I have to make sure that the chart worked and that that what I would have forecast happened." And he
okay.
said, "What's the point of that?" And I thought,
Well, it's to calibrate. It's to calibrate to
and
make
I
sure you've
thought,
got the
"Well,
right
hold
chart.
hold on a minute. There's no way that I can start forecasting on a chart you say is when this company began, because it may be the wrong chart. I have to
Yes,
test. I've got to
yes.
test this." Yesterday, I listened to Carol Tebbs doing a work piece on rectification, which incidentally was superb, right?
Mhm,
Really, really superb.
mhm.
And really, she was showing how you can't believe anything. You have to test everything, right? Just because somebody says they were born at 5 to 10, right? Test it with their life. You got the story, right? Because we're all of us, subject to somebody wrote the time down. It might have been 2 or 3 minutes out. But test it.
Yes.
And I thought she was tremendous. It was a really brilliant piece because she did it. She's so measured. I don't know if you've heard her, but it was really
No.
thorough. It was really, really good.
Well, that's very scientific. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, I thought, yeah, that's really interesting. My approach tends to be a lot more instinctive. So, what do you kind of put that down to? This.
I have far too many planets in my 6th house. Right.
Okay.
Right. So,
Yes, they're very busy.
yes, the research fascinates me.
Ah, okay.
And you could argue that I make work. I'll accept that.
Yeah, but I suppose that's the Sagittarius moon that gets excited. Let's open 6 charts.
Let's get them all on the table here. Let's not stop with one. Let's look at them all. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
but good, clean fun every day until it goes wrong, and then when it goes wrong, it's awful.
Yes. But I mean, this brings me back to the solar eclipse chart with all the mutable stuff. And I've kind of noticed while you're talking about all of this, that of course, by this stage, Saturn has retrograded back into Pisces and is opposite that eclipse. So yes, that is very interesting. So you've got this far more sharp Mars-Pluto square.
Yep.
In the cardinals,
Yeah.
but then you've got this underlying subversive,
Yes.
mutable energy that's also quite menacing, as you say. Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. And then you've got rising. You've got Uranus in Gemini, which is obviously trining Pluto. I mean, your feeling about Uranus-Pluto, sort of in terms of their trine.
Well, as I said, I don't think they can be looked at just as a pair. I think it has to be looked at really as this quintet, really.
Okay.
I think we've got to take the whole thing into being.
Okay.
And supposing I were painting it, right?
Right.
I suppose that's the way I would start, thinking about painting it. It's got to, if I were painting it, it's highly technical, isn't it, when you put Uranus and Pluto there? But it's a bunch of wires that aren't necessarily connected. So it looks, when you go into the cellar and you've put all the dead electrical equipment there, and it's all bits of wires.
Yes,
because nobody ever tidies anything up. That's how I feel we are. I feel we're like a telephone exchange at the moment. Nobody's got the lines plugged into the right place yet.
Interesting. Well, that makes me think of the period. Do you know Michael Lewis's book, Flash Boys?
Yes.
It makes me think of that with the telephone lines going into the exchanges
Yep.
and people trying to work out how much cabling they needed in order to sort of make their slow down their connection to the exchange versus how, the laying of the cables and how fast to make them. And I mean, that whole scene caused so much chaos, didn't it?
And that's exactly where I think we are now. And
Interesting.
it's a painting that you can't actually grasp what the story is yet.
Yes, absolutely.
You can see all the colors. You've got an idea of the shapes, but you can't get the story yet. And I think we're going to get the story, as we always do with retrospect, you get the story. But we're living in it now. So what can we do now? Well, I have to accept that there's a real strong chance that I'm never going to get to the end of certain pieces of research during this period. Is that,
yes,
because
absolutely.
I've got all these different strands. But within the strands, there is something there. And I'm absolutely confident that once I get to 2028, that some of that stuff is going to bear fruit. I don't think it's a waste of time keeping going now. But I don't like the mess in the interim. Granted, I don't like that. And away from a personal thing and just looking at politics and society and what have you, we seem to have gone into and maybe this is a reflection of the Uranus-Pluto and that thing. Everything's black or white. You're either on that side or that side.
Yes, there's polarization. Yes.
And compromise has become a dirty word.
Absolutely.
And
yes,
listening to the other person has become a dirty, that's not acceptable. And maybe we have to go through all of this in order to realize that actually that's necessary.
Totally. And this is the sort of the extension of the effect that social media has had on society, this kind of this polarization. And I suppose Uranus too as the sort of the cutter or the splitter or the separator, cutting into two.
Yep.
Interesting.
And on that, Lisa, I was reading, I write occasionally for the Astrology News Service, doing little pieces there. And we have been doing a thing where we just focus on 350 words on something. This is what they call atomic essays.
So the atom as in going to the smallest possible molecule, like very zen.
Yes. Yeah. And in doing that, although the discipline is very good, that's the Saturn bit, right? You also lose the space for discussing the potential.
Absolutely. That's true. It is very true.
And I'm thinking now that this is maybe just part of what we're going through presently, is stripping everything to this tiny thing so it becomes a mess of wires. And then later on, resolving things. I don't know if that's
one hopes.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, and this sort of became clear to me a few months ago when I was doing I did a podcast on the ingress of Uranus into Gemini, and I'd totally forgotten that when Uranus was discovered, it was considered a malefic.
Yes.
And in fact, it showed as a malefic. I mean, there's a story about Varley. And of course, Uranus was discovered in Gemini. So there's definitely an echo of some of the disruption that we saw during that period with the scientific revolution.
Yes.
Coming back now through AI. That we're going to have to go through a period similar to after the Renaissance.
Yes.
Where you have this period of adjustment.
Yes.
Where you eventually things will get better, but to get there, you're going to have to sort of go through a lot of mess, wars, disagreements, undoing things before you kind of get there. So it's similar where you had the Protestant Revolution, you had the English Civil War, you had the French Revolution, and only sort of when people got to the other side of that did things sort of settle down and things,
Yes.
and that's my sense.
Yes, I think you're absolutely correct with that. I have to say, I do feel positive about the future. It might not sound as I am. Short term, term, I think it looks pretty ugly, right?
Yes, quite bumpy.
I'm not very good at all. But I mean, if I would encourage people, and I have been saying to people, listen, yes, this Star of David and this kite formation that's coming up doesn't look so good on world affairs, but actually we could use this. There's a really lovely kite in there. If you've got an idea, a kite can be a fantastic thing. It gives you an idea, you can float an idea. Right?
Right.
You don't want your kite to get tangled up with other people's kites, so you're going to have to be careful about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And learn to fly it, right?
Yes.
And yes, there will be a time when you've got to bring it into land and deal with the practicalities. Because remember, this kite is fire and air. It's, it's off to the races, really, right? But then it has to be taken home and looked after so it can be flown again another time. I do think the cosmic messages that might come through in August, for those of us who want to listen out for them, they could be superb. That could be real genius stuff that comes in.
Interesting. Well, I mean, that's certainly something to kind of look forward to and to
I'm
sort of
good.
note.
I'm a great believer. I think all astrologers should read things like the New Scientist and things and see what the breakthroughs are that are coming.
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
I'm really convinced that some of the stuff that that comes out of this August's research things will be to the benefit of all. But yes, the other side of it, is going to be an ugliness, which God knows, can it really get much worse in Gaza?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I really kind of felt during this last eclipse cycle, as I said, with that nine new north, that we had reached a kind of a nadir point as far as that is concerned. And I mean, obviously, we've had eclipses the last few years in the sort of Aries-Libra kind of axis, but it just felt as though the kind of Mars war stuff had kind of reached a new low, and yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that as the nodes, kind of move off that stuff and we don't have Israel's Saturn-Pluto being activated all the time,
Yeah.
that things will sort of calm down there, because it does. I mean, that sort of can feel a little bit, I don't want to say apocalyptic, but it definitely has those overtones, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
So that's sort of like a 2.5 year cycle, isn't it? The nodes kind of change signs.
It's not, I mean, the node moves fairly fast.
Yes. As you were saying, kind of trying to push things in a more hopeful direction. I should also sort of mention that with this solar eclipse that's coming up, we've got the sun and the moon in hexagram 46, which is about pushing upward, the strength to push through, to rise above obstacles towards your goals. So being determined, being guided by what feels right to you in the moment, and embracing your own sense of kind of timing and method. So, I mean, that's quite positive as well. I found the hexagrams quite useful when it comes to just giving an overtone to a particular eclipse. So, yeah, gosh, well, I mean, we've covered so much territory,
Well, we
Christine.
have.
I'm sure, listeners their minds will be sort of boggling at this point.
Well,
yeah, so maybe we should sort of wrap it up by explaining to listeners who don't know what you mean by the Star of David, what chart you're talking about, so they can kind of go and look this up.
well,
if they want
I would
to.
look at look. You've got a choice. Start on the 3rd of August. Right? It depends
Okay.
how you set up your different software. But just read it in an ephemeris. If you start with the 3rd of August and look through for about a week, and you'll find that you've got 3 planets in trine to one another in fire signs, and another 3 that are in trine in air signs, and they superimpose one on the other.
Yes, so a lot of positive energy.
It is it's a lot of positive energy. I know trines are supposed to be lazy aspects, but I'm kind of hoping that, especially because you'd put the 2 trines together, you end up with this kite formation in amongst it.
Yes, and planets involved very active as well.
Yes, they're very active, and that, yes, okay, it doesn't sound very nice, Mars being opposing to Saturn-Neptune, but it will equally be in trine to Uranus and Saturn at one end and trine to Pluto at the other. So I think, as astrologers, and with that little bit of knowledge, with a tiny bit of meditation through that time, you could lift off a very good idea. I hope you can anyway.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's, I think, a positive note to end on.
Yeah.
So, yes, gosh, well, thanks so much for your time, Christine. This has been fascinating.
Well, it's a pleasure, Lisa.
As I say, I've learned so much. I'm sure that listeners have too.
I've learned a lot from you as well, so I'm grateful for that. I've made some notes along the way, and I'll use them tomorrow.
Well, fabulous. It's always nice if it's a mutual exchange.
Yeah.
So that's great. So yes, maybe next time you'll come back on and we'll talk about the chart of mankind.
Yes, we should do that. We should do that at another time.
For early access to more mundane and financial astrology forecasts and interviews like this, as well as other exclusive material, visit the Astro Insights blog and subscribe to our newsletter.